Welcome to the DRS Zone Deep Dive. Man, I am so pumped you are joining us today because we are looking at something that is absolutely turning the motorsport world upside down.
Oh, is absolute chaos out there right now.
Total chaos. And just a quick note right up front, this segment is part of our news coverage of recent F1 events. And honestly, the news we are covering today is just insane. We are tearing into the 2026 Formula One regulations.
Yeah, and we need to be clear here. This is not just a minor tweak to the rule book or some little aerodynamic adjustment.
Right.
This is a monumental, completely blank slate that is rewriting the entire DNA of the sport.
It's explosive. And to understand the sheer scale of what's happening, you've brought in a massive stack of sources for today's mission, right?
I have, yeah. We are pulling directly from the technical breakdowns in Formula One's official guides. Plus, we've got some incredibly deep dive engineering analysis from paddock insiders who are actually seeing these cars up close.
Which is where the real secrets are.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, we are looking at some very candid, honestly, almost alarming interviews from the drivers themselves as they tried to wrestle these totally new machines around the track.
So our mission today, right here in the DRS zone, is to decode the biggest rule change in F1 history. We want to uncover the secret engineering wars happening behind the scenes, the real cloak and dagger development battles.
Stuff the teams don't want you to see.
Oh, absolutely. And we are going to explain exactly why the 2026 cars are going to completely change the way drivers actually race. It is a totally new era, and you're going to see it the literal second these cars roll out of the garage.
You really will.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've seen the physical footprint of the cars changing. They're smaller, right? Dropping to a 724 kilogram minimum weight.
Right, which is a significant diet for these modern cars.
The chassis is 100 millimeters narrower. And they are capping that wheelbase at 3.4 meters. So we are looking at a much more compact machine riding on narrower Pirelli tires with those 5 compounds, C1 through C5. But why do those specific geometric changes matter so much? Like, how does that completely alter the behavior of the car on track?
Well, what's fascinating here is the relationship between that new, smaller footprint and the shift away from the heavy ground effect aerodynamics we've seen over the last few years.
It's the tunnels.
Exactly. Those previous cars relied on massive underbody tunnels to generate immense high-speed grip. They felt heavy, planted, essentially glued to the tarmac.
Like driving a train on rails?
Right.
Yeah.
But that entire philosophy is gone now. The 2026 cars feature largely flat floors and significantly less overall downforce.
Yeah.
So when you combine a much shorter, narrower wheelbase with less aerodynamic load and a drastic weight reduction, you fundamentally change the car's center of gravity and its polar moment of inertia.
Yeah, meaning what for the guy sitting in the cockpit?
Meaning the result is a car that is incredibly darty. It's highly agile, but significantly more nervous. You're going to see these cars moving around on the track a lot more.
Just sliding everywhere.
Constantly. The drivers will be working that steering wheel nonstop, managing snaps of oversteer, catching slides that simply wouldn't have happened with the older ground effect floors.
Man, it sounds like they're driving on a total knife edge, which honestly, the purists are absolutely going to love.
Oh, they'll eat it up.
But the era shift is only half the story here. The power units are getting an equally massive, totally aggressive overhaul. They are shifting to 100% sustainable second-generation biofuels.
Which is a huge logistical leap on its own.
Huge, but the architecture of the engine itself, that's what seems to be causing the most immediate, brutal chaos in the paddock.
Yeah, we're looking at a radical 50-50 power split. The total output is still hovering around 1,000 horsepower, but half of that now comes from the internal combustion engine.
And the other half is electric.
Exactly. Generated by a massive 350 kilowatt electric motor. But to package a battery and motor system capable of delivering that kind of sustained electrical deployment, the FIA had to free up space and weight.
So they had to cut something out.
They did. Their solution was to completely mandate the removal of the MGU-H.
The exhaust recovery system. And man, the removal of the MGU-H is causing an absolute nightmare for the drivers, especially right on the starting grid.
It is a disaster right now.
Without that system actively schooling the turbocharger, the immediate crisis these teams are facing is catastrophic turbo lag off the line. Like, it's making the cars incredibly loud, which the grandstands will appreciate, sure, but inside the cockpit, it is a totally different, terrifying story.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of racecraft, the launch off the grid has historically been an exercise in hyper-precise clutch mapping and reaction times.
Just drop in the clutch and go.
Right. But now, The drivers are fighting the internal combustion engine's inherent physical limitations. Without the MGU-H acting as an advanced anti-lag system, finding the exact RPM sweet spot to launch the car is proving nearly impossible.
So what happens when they miss that sweet spot?
Well, if the revs drop even slightly below the optimal window when the clutch is released, the engine severely bogs down, because there's absolutely no turbo boost to bail them out.
They just crawl off the line.
Exactly. Conversely, if they overcompensate and feed in too much throttle, the massive instantaneous torque from that 350 kilowatt electric motor instantly overwhelms the rear tires.
And you just get massive wheel spin.
You're just smoking the rears and going nowhere.
The days of the pole sitter just sailing smoothly into turn one might be completely over. I mean, George Russell was incredibly blunt about this in the source material. He mentioned that he had 2 practice starts during early testing runs, and he called them the 2 worst starts of his entire Formula One career.
That is incredibly telling.
You could qualify on pole after a flawless lap and be totally sick with anxiety by the time the 5 red lights go out, because you have zero confidence in the launch sequence.
And the anxiety of managing this new powertrain, it does not stop at turn 1. The entire philosophy of how a driver constructs a lap, attacks a rival, defends a position, it has been fundamentally rewritten by these regulations.
Which brings us to the actual wheel-to-wheel combat. The sources outline that the traditional DRS setup is entirely a thing of the past. It's gone.
Completely gone.
Instead, the cars are running an active aero system where both the front and rear wing flaps open simultaneously to shed drag on the straights. Paired with that is the introduction of a new overtake mode.
This is the brutal part.
I'm looking at the data here, and it seems like the entire concept of the free overtake is dead. It's just over.
It is, and this raises an important question about the mental load on the drivers. Under the previous regulations, if you managed to get within 1 second of the car ahead at the detection point, you deployed your rear wing flap, dumped your drag, and took a massive, essentially cost-free speed advantage down the straight.
Just breeze right past them.
Right, but overtaking in 2026 requires an active, punitive transaction.
Punitive. I love that word for this.
Because it is. The overtake mode gives you a massive injection of electrical energy from that 350 kilowatt motor, but you are draining it from a highly restricted battery reserve.
It's a huge gamble.
A massive gamble. If you commit to an overtake and deploy that electrical boost, you might completely empty your available energy allocation for that lap. If you don't make the pass stick, or if the driver ahead perfectly counters your move, you are functionally defenseless on the very next straight.
Because the defending driver might still have their energy ready to deploy.
Exactly. They just boost right back past you.
It's a high-speed game of poker at 300 kilometers per hour. One of the paddock insiders in our sources drew a comparison that really puts this into perspective. They noted that managing a stint in 2026 is going to feel remarkably similar to the energy management strategies we see in Formula E.
And the telemetry data absolutely backs up that comparison. The drivers are working with a brutally tight energy budget of roughly 2.5 kilowatt hours per lap.
Which doesn't sound like a lot.
It isn't. Let's visualize what that actually means on the track. Imagine a driver is hurtling toward a heavy braking zone, pulling massive G-forces as they scrub speed from 320 kilometers per hour down to 80.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Under normal conditions, the powertrain relies on that specific braking event to aggressively harvest energy through regenerative braking. They're expecting to pull in about 0.3 to 0.4 kilowatt hours of energy in that single corner to top up their budget for the upcoming straight.
Okay, so what happens if they push just a fraction of a percent too hard? Like they lock up the front tires or get a snap of oversteer and have to momentarily lift off the brake pedal to catch the car. What happens then?
That is the critical vulnerability of this system. If a driver locks up or slides out of the optimal braking phase, the regenerative harvesting is instantly disrupted.
Oh, man.
That 0.3 kilowatt hours of energy is just gone. And there is no secondary mechanism to claw it back. They have permanently lost a massive chunk of their 2.5 kilowatt hour budget for that lap.
The lap is just ruined.
The cascading effect is immediate. They won't have the required deployment for the next straight, their top speed will plummet, they will be vulnerable to attack from behind, and their lap time will completely fall apart.
I couldn't help but laugh when one of the engineers in the sources noted that race engineers are going to have to operate as high-level sports psychologists this year.
They really are.
Picture a driver fighting for a podium position. They get slightly impatient, miss the apex by 6 inches, lock a wheel, and instantly realize they've just torched their energy budget for the lap.
The rage in the cockpit would be intense.
The race engineer is going to have to get on the radio and calmly talk them down from a massive adrenaline spike, so they don't overdrive the next 3 corners trying to make up the lost time, which would obviously only drain the battery even further.
Right. The behavior of the car is basically going to be a direct reflection of the driver's emotional discipline.
It's wild.
The required precision is staggering. You simply cannot muscle these cars around the track on pure emotion and a heavy right foot anymore. It requires a cold, calculating approach to energy expenditure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because while the drivers are dealing with this psychological warfare on the track, the teams are engaged in a massive political and engineering war back in the paddock.
Oh, the politics are vicious right now.
Let's dig into this Mercedes engine controversy. I was reading the reports about a compression ratio trick that Mercedes supposedly engineered. But how did they actually manage to hide a massive horsepower advantage from the FIA? Like, how does that even happen?
This is a textbook example of Formula One engineering teams exploiting the gray areas of a new rulebook. According to the paddock insiders, Mercedes identified a highly specific loophole in how the FIA defined and measured the combustion engine's compression ratio during the homologation process.
Okay.
By interpreting the wording in a very specific way, they developed a system that effectively altered the compression dynamics under load. The estimates suggest this loophole yielded an advantage of anywhere from 15 to 25 extra horsepower.
That is massive.
To put that in context, on a power-sensitive circuit, 25 horsepower translates to roughly 0.3 of a second per lap. In modern Formula One, finding 0.3 of a second from a single power unit loophole is like finding a pot of gold.
But the way they disguised it is the craziest part of the whole saga. The FIA's standard scrutineering protocol for the 2026 engines involved a cold test on the dyno.
Yes, cold testing.
So when the FIA engineers ran their sensors and checked the compression ratio in the garage under these cold-controlled conditions, the Mercedes power unit appeared completely legal, totally compliant.
Clean as a whistle.
But the moment the car hit the track and the engine block reached its actual operating temperatures, the physical properties shifted, the loophole activated, and they were suddenly generating this massive spike in power. It's genius.
It is, but in Formula One, telemetry is scrutinized by everyone. Secrets of that magnitude do not stay hidden. The acoustic signatures of the engines, the GPS acceleration traces out of the corners, it all paints a picture.
Everyone's watching.
Exactly. The rival manufacturers, specifically Audi, Honda, Red Bull powertrains, and Ferrari, quickly realized what Mercedes was doing. They banded together and applied immense political pressure on the FIA to amend the testing protocols and close the loophole.
They weren't having it.
No. They successfully lobbied for the implementation of a rigorous hot test, conducted at 130 degrees Celsius, to simulate actual race conditions. Furthermore, they secured an agreement that by 2027, the cold test protocol will be eliminated entirely.
So Mercedes gets caught red-handed. But this is the twist that absolutely fascinated me in the sources. The rival teams didn't demand that the FIA ban the trick immediately before the first race.
No, they didn't.
Instead, they compromised and agreed to a June 1st deadline for the hot test implementation. Wait, why would Ferrari, Red Bull, and Audi voluntarily allow Mercedes to run a power unit with a 25 horsepower advantage for the entire first third of the calendar year? That makes no sense.
On the surface, it doesn't. But it comes down to a regulatory mechanism called the ADU, or Aerodynamic and Development Upgrades. What's fascinating here is the sheer strategic brilliance of the trap the rival teams have set. A massive trap. The financial regulations and development restrictions in F1 include a handicap system. If a power unit manufacturer is demonstrably and significantly behind the class leader in performance metrics, the FIA grants them extra developmental allowances.
Meaning more wind tunnel time.
More wind tunnel time, more dyno time, more budget, and more freedom to upgrade their components to close that competitive gap.
Oh my God. I see exactly where this is going.
Right. By strategically allowing Mercedes to retain their massive loophole-driven advantage for the early races, Ferrari, Red Bull, Audi, and Honda can mathematically prove to the FIA that they are operating at a severe power deficit.
Wow.
This automatically triggers the ADU regulations in their favor. They are intentionally sacrificing the early phase of the championship to unlock crucial extra development time and budget.
And they will pour those extra resources into upgrading the foundational architecture of their own engines.
Precisely. Then the June 1st deadline arrives. The FIA implements the 130-degree hot test. Mercedes' power unit instantly fails the new protocol, forcing them to fundamentally redesign their engine mid-season to remove the loophole.
Stripping away their 25 horsepower advantage entirely, that is just devious.
It is brilliant.
The rivals get to permanently upgrade their engines using the catch-up rules, and the exact moment their newly evolved engines hit the track, Mercedes gets brutally nerfed by the rule change. They aren't just engineering car parts, they are playing four-dimensional chess with the regulatory framework itself.
Exactly. Mercedes will have to burn their limited seasonal budget just to make their engine legal again, while everyone else is using that time to pull ahead.
It is a highly calculated, long-term strategic strike. It perfectly illustrates how championships are often won in the boardroom and the reading of the rule book long before the cars even get to the grid.
That's modern Formula One for you.
Speaking of pulling ahead, we really need to look at what Ferrari is doing. Because based on the deep dive analysis of the preseason testing data, the Ferrari SF26 looks terrifyingly fast.
It's a rocket.
Often in testing, you see teams doing glory runs, putting on the softest tires, draining the fuel tank to absolute zero, and setting a blistering lap time just to generate positive press.
We see it every year.
But the sources show Ferrari was doing the exact opposite. Charles Leclerc was out there in Bahrain, baking in 45-degree track temperatures, running full race distance simulations with 50 kilograms of fuel in the car, and the data showed his tire degradation was virtually non-existent.
Ferrari's execution of these new regulations appears incredibly robust.
Yes.
Their power unit seems highly reliable, and their launch sequence, which we established earlier as a massive hurdle without the MGU-H, is currently the smoothest and most consistent in the paddock.
Which is a huge advantage.
A massive advantage. But the paddock insiders are pointing to two highly specific, aggressive aerodynamic innovations that Ferrari brought to the SF26 that are really turning heads.
Yeah, the technical breakdowns in the sources detail these two tricks. The first involves their rear wing. Instead of the standard linear flap mechanism for the new active aero, Ferrari has developed a rotary DRS system.
Right.
It's a highly complex mechanical interpretation of the rules that pivots the wing elements differently.
Sure.
The GPS traces suggest this rotary system is much more efficient at dumping drag, giving them an extra 8 kilometers per hour of top speed at the end of the straights compared to what the other teams are managing.
Which is huge.
But the second innovation sounds like something straight out of the history books.
It really does. It's an aerodynamic element the Italian media is referring to as the FTM. Essentially, Ferrari's aerodynamicists have designed a structure that sits directly in the path of the engine exhaust plume.
Okay.
They're purposefully capturing the high-velocity exhaust gases and routing them over specific aerodynamic surfaces to artificially generate extra downforce at the rear axle.
It is the blown diffuser concept from the early 2010s all over again.
Precisely. We discussed how nervous and darty these 2026 cars are, especially given the explosive torque delivery from the 350 kilowatt electric motor trying to break those rear tires loose.
Yeah, they're sliding everywhere.
Right. So Ferrari's FTM solution uses the constant stream of exhaust pressure to effectively pin the rear of the car to the tarmac. The engineering analysis estimates that this single innovation is yielding roughly half a second of lap time.
Half a second? That's light years in F1.
It is. Furthermore, because this system relies on the highly specific proprietary physical layout of Ferrari's engine block, gearbox, and exhaust routing, it is going to be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for rival teams to simply copy it and bolt it onto their own cars in the short term.
It makes total sense why Lewis Hamilton is absolutely losing his mind on social media. I mean, he posted this incredibly hyped message to his followers saying, "I feel reset. This is going to be an incredible season. I'm not going anywhere."
He knows what he has.
He is clearly looking at the telemetry data of that SF26 and realizing he might be sitting in the fastest car on the grid.
It is a stark contrast to the sheer panic unfolding in some of the other garages right now. When you get the incredibly complex integration of these 2026 power units right, you get a masterpiece like the Ferrari. But when you get it wrong, the results are catastrophic.
Catastrophic is the right word. The reports coming out of the Aston Martin garage regarding their new Honda power unit sound absolutely apocalyptic. During the testing sessions in Bahrain, the battery packs inside the Aston Martin weren't just failing, they were literally destroying themselves from the inside out.
The root cause of the Aston Martin crisis comes down to severe physical vibrations and harmonic frequencies. Honda developed the internal combustion engine at their facility in Japan. On their isolated testing dynos, the engine performed flawlessly.
Sure, in a lab setting.
Exactly. However, an engine is a violently vibrating piece of metal. When you physically bolt that V6 engine to the carbon fiber chassis and the gearbox, the entire structure interacts in highly unpredictable ways.
The harmonics.
Yes. The physical vibrations and harmonic resonances transferring from the chassis into the powertrain were so violent that they literally shattered the internal cellular structure of the battery packs, causing them to fatally short-circuit on track.
What's wild is reading why they didn't catch such a massive physical integration issue before they shipped the cars to Bahrain. The sources point out that Aston Martin does not currently have a functioning VTT, a virtual test track, at their Silverstone headquarters.
Which is a glaring omission for a top-tier team. A virtual test track is a massive, multi-million-dollar piece of infrastructure. It is essentially a giant physical rig where a team can bolt the actual engine, gearbox, suspension, and battery pack together in a laboratory environment.
Yeah, just run it.
Right. The rig then physically shakes and simulates the exact forces, vibrations, and loads of a lap around a Grand Prix circuit. Because Aston Martin lacked a VTT, they had absolutely no way to test the physical marriage of the Honda engine to their specific chassis architecture.
So they just bolted it together and hoped for the best.
And they were forced to discover this catastrophic harmonic vibration issue the hard way, out on the actual circuit, literally melting down millions of dollars worth of battery cells.
It highlights just how unbelievably unforgiving this new era is. If a team doesn't have the absolute bleeding-edge simulation infrastructure, these machines will literally tear themselves to pieces.
I will.
But the technical failure of the cars is only one part of the story today. We are seeing a very real human toll emerging, and the sources heavily focus on the reigning champion, Max Verstappen.
Verstappen's absolute candor during this preseason has been deeply revealing. Here is a driver who is arguably operating at the absolute pinnacle of his physical and mental abilities. He isn't even 30 years old yet, and he is very openly, very seriously discussing the end of his Formula One career.
I was reading the transcripts from a recent interview he gave, and his quotes are stunning. He flat out stated that his career is definitely closer to the end and heavily implied that these sweeping 2026 regulations are actively pushing him toward the exit door.
He's not hiding his feelings.
Not at all. He seems deeply frustrated with how hyper-complex, restrictive, and frankly exhausting these new cars are to manage over a race distance.
And his frustration extends far beyond just the technical regulations. He is pointing a massive spotlight at the sheer, relentless, grueling grind of the modern Formula One calendar. He asked a very pointed existential question in that interview. He said, "Who cares about trying to go around the world 24 times a year to get another title?"
Wow.
He made it very clear that the difference between winning 4 world championships or 8 world championships is meaningless to him compared to the desire to actually live his life, have free time, and spend it with his family.
It is such a profoundly human reaction from someone we normally view as just a racing machine. He has conquered the sport, achieved every metric of success, and now he's sitting in a car where he has to hyper-manage a 2.5 kilowatt-hour battery budget every single lap, where he can't push flat out because a single lockup ruins his energy harvesting, where the starts are an unpredictable nightmare of turbo lag. He is looking at all of this and asking, is the pure joy of driving still here?
He even noted that he is completely at peace with his legacy in Formula One and could walk away tomorrow because he has other passions and projects he wants to pursue. Though it is worth noting, he firmly ruled out a transition to rally racing.
That specific detail from the interview was fantastic. He said he won't do rally racing because, in his exact words, the tree doesn't move.
That's a great line.
It really is. He is fully aware of the inherent dangers of motorsport, but he deeply trusts the incredibly engineered safety barriers, the halo, and the runoff areas of modern Formula One circuits. He has absolutely no interest in risking his life wrapping a car around a pine tree in the middle of a snowy forest.
You can't blame him.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It is a very grounded, incredibly mature perspective from a driver who spent his early career defined by his absolute uncompromising ruthlessness.
If we synthesize all the sources, the technical data, and the paddock politics, the picture of 2026 is incredibly stark. Formula One is fundamentally transforming. It is moving away from being a pure, visceral test of bravery and raw mechanical grip and evolving into a hyper-complex, high-speed chess match.
A completely different sport.
The driver is no longer just a pilot. They are now one highly stressed node in a delicate, continuous feedback loop with their race engineer, their battery management software, and their aerodynamics team.
Yeah.
Success in 2026 is going to require perfectly timing, active aero deployment, flawless energy harvesting, and navigating intense political engineering warfare in the paddock.
For you listening right now, the key takeaway is that you are about to witness the most unpredictable, chaotic, and technologically advanced season in the history of motorsport. The old days of a driver just mashing the throttle, relying on massive downforce, and hoping for the best are completely dead.
Long gone.
Mental processing power and absolute discipline are going to matter just as much, if not more, than a heavy right foot this year. The margins for error have completely vanished.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating question.
It does, and that leaves us with a final thought to mull over before we wrap up today's deep dive. The entire stated goal of these 2026 regulations was to force the cars to be more efficient, to pioneer sustainable green technology, and to artificially bring the racing closer together.
That was the plan.
But if these untamed, deeply frustrating, hyper-complex vehicles end up being so mentally exhausting to drive that they actually push the most naturally gifted, generational talent drivers like Max Verstappen into early retirement, is this massive technological leap forward actually going to cost the sport its greatest stars?
It's a heavy question.
Something to really think about as the new cars roll onto the grid. Thanks for joining us on this DRS Zone deep dive. Don't forget to follow the DRS Zone podcast on all platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube for the most aggressive, explosive F1 coverage out there. We will catch you next time.